And on behalf of the Institute of African American Affairs, I would like to welcome you to the screening of Shola Lynch's much anticipated documentary, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners. We will have a conversation with Shola Lynch, the filmmaker, and Angela Davis after the screening. So we hope you will stay. But I'd like to welcome the filmmaker who's here right now and would like to just say a quick hello.
Hi. I am Shola Lynch, spelled Shola, pronounced Shala, my whole life. No worries, no worries. Soft O, Nigerian name. One who brings honor and riches. So, you know, I'm trying to claim it. I just want to thank you all for coming out. Obviously, I'm looking forward to the conversation afterwards. Hopefully, it will be spirited. The only thing I will say about the film is this was a passion project. It took 8 years to make. It took involving financing from several countries, France in particular, before the Americans would really step up. And so I'm very proud that it exists. It premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in 2012. It was picked up by Code Black and Lionsgate, was in theaters. It's now on iTunes and DVD. It makes a wonderful gift. And then it also won, okay, I'm in the business of filmmaking, people. And actually, it does matter, units sold, because it makes it easier to make more political films going forward. So it does matter. And the last thing I will say is I'm incredibly honored that the film, Angela's story, this story, was given an NAACP Image Award. We won for Best Documentary over... And I was a little nervous because 20 Feet from Stardom was also in the same category. I was like, oh, my people. But, and as we know, 20 Feet from Stardom won the Academy Award, which is great. I love Morgan Neville. But the NAACP Award, I wanted it to be for this one. So with that, enjoy the film, and please come with your questions. We're ready.
Thank you.
And Shala.
I'll start, first of all, by thanking you for a beautiful film. And is it working? Okay. 1 second, please. We're working on the microphone.
Check, check.
This is a film that has taken you many years to make, and you said it's a passion project. Why did you want to make a film on Angela Davis?
I think that's one of the hardest questions. I had finished a film on Shirley Chisholm and her run for president in 1972, and it had taken me 3 or 4 years to make. And I was like, I'm never going to do that again, you know? And so I thought, what is a subject, who is a person who is more accessible, who people know? And people kept saying Angela Davis, Angela Davis. We've all rocked an Angela Davis t-shirt in our day. But then, and so that was really the impetus. And as I looked into the story, I realized that I didn't know the woman. I only knew the icon. And I wanted to know the relationship between the women. How did this 26-year-old philosophy graduate student, you know, a bookworm, become an international political icon in the 70s? Her story is true, but it's not believable. And, and honestly, if I'd written it as a narrative scripted version and gone to Hollywood, they would have been like, oh yeah, white farmer, no way. Aretha Franklin, this woman, 2 languages, 3 languages, no way, you know, etc. So I became fascinated, and part of it is because I'm a black woman, and I consider myself to be complicated and nuanced, and so I can't be the first one. So I use my historical imagination when I look back, and I look for characters, particularly women, because we're written out. And so I was drawn to this very complicated person, Angela Davis.
Now, one of the things in making a film, one of the challenges in making a creative work is selection. Angela Davis, as you mentioned, is complicated, has a full life, there are many Angela Davises. How did you decide what to focus on while making this documentary?
For me, it was the genesis. How do you become, I mean, in a way the film ends where it does, and you say, this is the way we lived our life. This wasn't something we just did. And it has been the work you've been doing decade after decade, issue after issue. And I wondered where the person we see today came from. And the crux of that, the platform, the events, the choices that catapulted Angela Davis into that political figure were these moments. And I like looking back to see how the young woman became the icon.
Good. And now, Angela, much has been said in the documentary about Marcuse and about some of the events that influenced you at that time. Your first lecture at UCLA was on Frederick Douglass. I wonder if you could talk about the thinkers, the activists, the people with ideas that excited you and engaged you at that time. Who made Angela Davis at that time in terms of ideas?
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming out. Well, of course, you got to see Herbert Marcuse. And he was a major influence. I had encountered Herbert Marcuse first as an undergraduate at Brandeis University. And I had begun to study philosophy with him. And as a result, I ended up going to Frankfurt, Germany to study there for several years. I studied with Marxists, and there are a whole number of people who I might count as influences. But I'll say that what was really remarkable was the response that came from intellectuals in Europe and all over this country when I was in jail. You know, I had never met Jean-Paul Sartre, but having grown up when I did, and even before I began to study philosophy, I was mesmerized by existentialism, as everybody else was during that period. And to learn that Sartre was involved in the campaign, had signed the petitions, had appealed to people to join the campaign for my freedom, that Lukács and people like Aimé Césaire, and all over the world, really. So I could talk about my influences, but I think it's also important to, and this is, I keep repeating this. This is why I actually agreed to work with Charlotte as she made this film, because I had been asked by quite a number of people before if I were interested in a film, and I really wasn't interested in a film about me, about myself as an individual. I was more interested in people learning about the movement that was generated at that time. And because Shala said she wanted to focus on the trial, it's impossible to tell the story of that trial without also telling the story of the movement that was generated around the demand for my freedom. And that is why I was eventually freed. If it had simply been an isolated court trial, I would more than likely still be in jail today.
But in our first meeting, I did say this is a political crime thriller, and that it is political. It's a political crime thriller, and your life is part of the telling of the story. So we have this argument about the film, her life, and she says my film in the sense of how it was constructed in terms of the narrative. But true to your point, good history demands that the context be part of the storytelling and the movement, which was international.
Talking about the thriller, how difficult or challenging was it to find the FBI agent to share what he shared with you?
Well, he was phenomenal off camera. Phenomenal off camera. And what we see on camera is a slightly different person. He didn't want to give the full story. But what I found fascinating is that he was a true G-man, government man, in the sense that he had a job to do, and he was very proud of this case because he had been part of capturing Angela Davis. Her picture was in his study, you know. Yeah. It was, yeah, no, it was. It was in his study, and he was this he's actually was quite a lovely man, and so for him it was about for him it was pride in his trade and his craft, and not so much the politics. And in fact, at one point he said, I asked him, well, what did you think about her? Were you afraid of her? Or did you think she was this guilty person the way she was described in the media? And he thought a second, and he said, well, her brother was a football player. They were all an all-American family. So for him, it really was pride in his craft.
Angela?
I don't know if I should respond to that. Yeah. But I can say that, as I told Shala after seeing the film, I had not known how the FBI came to capture me. I did not know that story. So I learned 40 years later about the fact that the FBI was tracking me from Chicago to New York to Florida and back. And I did not know that they had gone into every parking lot in Manhattan. I mean, that's what he said, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine how much money that costs, the resources to go into every parking lot in Manhattan? How many schools that could build? But in any event, yeah, I didn't think of him as a nice man when he arrested me and pulled the wig off of my head and dragged me into a hotel room in Howard Johnson's. But we have our different perspectives.
And that's history.
The other thing you talk about, they actually gave me a microphone. The other thing that you talk about is the imaginary enemy. Who was that, if you were to speculate, who was this imaginary enemy that they were constructing when they were looking for you?
Oh.
Because I thought that was a very powerful expression.
Is that what I said?
Yeah,
what did I say?
You said that you were the imaginary enemy, all these things.
Well, yeah. I realized early on that it wasn't really about me as an individual. I could not be the threat and the menace that they projected. There was no way. So it seemed that they were constructing this enemy that could not only apply to me in terms of the way it was imagined, but to, for example, every other black woman with a big natural at that time. Yeah. And I did discover that hundreds and hundreds, perhaps even thousands of black women were stopped by the police. Even one of the guards at the Women's House of Detention, which was just right over on Greenwich and 6th Avenue. Even one of the guards told me that she had been arrested and they only released her after she provided her identification indicating she was a guard at the Women's House of Detention. And so, why would they do that? Obviously, and this was a woman who did not look anything. She didn't look anything like me. She was maybe about 10 or 15 years older. Physically, there was no resemblance, but they used that as a pretext to basically terrorize black women. And I don't think that that was serendipitous. I don't think it was accidental. And that's why I say I don't see myself as being the only target of their repression. It was, I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they seized upon that and used that in order to conduct this campaign of terror against the movement, and very specifically against young black women.
Okay, I'd like to open it up for questions.